The one-year anniversary of President Trump's inauguration was marked this weekend by nationwide protests and a government shutdown that ended today despite Trump doing as little as possible to resolve it. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. It's been a year since Trump's inauguration and the historic women's marches that followed. And on Saturday, we saw yet again that the Women's March wasn't merely a one-time phenomenon, but a sustained movement unlike anything the country's seen in decades.
Women across the country were on the march today. Thousands took to the streets from coast to coast. They rallied for a variety of causes with a focus on having their voices heard in November's midterm elections.
Taking to the streets in over 300 rallies in all 50 states.
But it just wasn't in the U.S. where women marched. This was the scene in Nova Scotia where half the town of Sandy Cove also participated in the Women's March.
Wow. Half the town was protesting. That, I have to say, that's got to be super awkward for people who weren't there. Dale, I didn't see you at the Women's March. Oh, yeah, was it a good turnout? Half, Dale. It was half. Of course, one of the best parts of any protest are the signs, and this year it was especially refreshing to see children participating. Like this sign that said, "Vote for women," this sign that said, "Boys are equal to girls and girls are equal to boys," and then there was this little girl who clearly got to write her own sign. Although, to be fair, it's possible she spent more time on that than the Trump administration did on the original travel ban. Don't forget the purple circles. The purple circles make it legally airtight. Of course, Trump, who was cooped up in the White House all weekend watching coverage of the protests, couldn't help but weigh in, tweeting beautiful weather all over our great country, a perfect day for all women to march. Get out there now to celebrate the historic milestones and unprecedented economic success and wealth creation that has taken place over the last 12 months, lowest female unemployment in 18 years. Dude, you know that's not why they were marching. Trump's the kind of guy who, if he came home to find his wife dumped all his clothes on the sidewalk, would say to her, "I get it. You want to see me naked." I'll pick up on stuff. I'll pick up on stuff. So the one-year anniversary of Trump's inauguration saw a second straight year of sustained nationwide protests. But of course, it wasn't just the protests that marred Trump's celebration.
The government is shut down for the first time in more than 4 years. The art of the deal president could not reach that deal with Democrats and a few Republicans. And just a few hours ago, they marked the one-year anniversary of his presidency by rejecting a budget bill.
This is the first time in modern history, the first time in modern U.S. history, that a party that's controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House has had a government shutdown on their watch.
You gotta hand it to Trump. He finally did something no other president has ever done. Bush couldn't do it. Obama couldn't. We made history. We made history. Now, Trump has, of course, tried to claim it's actually Democrats who will suffer politically from the shutdown, tweeting over the weekend, "This is the one-year anniversary of my presidency, and the Democrats wanted to give me a nice president, hashtag Democrat shutdown." But there's at least one immutable law of physics that still applies in Washington. For each Trump quote, there's an equal and opposite Trump quote. And the question of who's to blame for government shutdowns is no exception, because when Obama was president, Trump was very clear about who was to blame.
Who's going to bear the brunt of the responsibility if indeed there is a shutdown of our government?
Well, if you say who gets fired, it always has to be the top. I mean, problems start from the top, and they have to get solved from the top, and the president's the leader. In 25 years and 50 years and 100 years from now, when the government is, when they talk about the government shutdown, they're going to be talking about the President of the United States. Who was the president at that time?
If there is a shutdown, I think it would be a tremendously negative mark on the President of the United States. I hear the Democrats are going to be blamed and the Republicans are going to be blamed. I actually think the President would be blamed.
There's literally not one situation where there isn't an old Trump quote that completely contradicts his current position. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an old Trump tweet out there that says only a loser would wear a baseball cap with a suit. In fact, Trump was asked point blank in 2011 how he would handle a potential shutdown differently from then President Obama, and in retrospect, let's say he was a little overconfident.
I'm a deal man. I made hundreds and hundreds of deals and transactions. He never did deals before. How can you expect a man that's not a deal man, that never did a deal, other than, frankly, becoming president of the United States? He never did a deal. How's he going to corral all these people?
So how would you do it now? Now, you're in the Oval Office right now.
I would get everybody together, and we'd have a budget, and it would
They've
get
all
done.
gotten together.
Well, that's because they don't have the right leader. You don't have the right leader. This is the President of the United States has to get this done. But it's pretty sad because the whole world is looking at us and laughing at us.
It's amazing. I agree with everything he just said. Of course, in reality, Republicans control all three branches of government, and on top of that, we have a president who repeatedly sold himself on the campaign trail as an ultimate deal maker.
We need a president that's going to be able to make deals, great deals.
I want to make great deals. That's what it is, for the people. I do hundreds of deals. The deals come out of my ears. If you can't make a good deal with a politician, then there's something wrong with you. You're certainly not very good. You can't leave the White House, go to Hawaii and play golf for 3 weeks and be a real deal maker. It doesn't work that way.
That's right. You can't go to Hawaii to play golf and be a deal maker. You have to go to Florida. And you can't do it for 3 weeks. You have to do it for an entire year. And yet, even as the government shutdown ended, the self-proclaimed deal man was MIA, completely absent from the negotiations and leaving everyone confused about where he stood. In fact, in order to counter that growing impression that Trump was sitting around doing nothing, the White House released a series of official photos of what they called President Donald J. Trump working in the White House during the Democrat shutdown, including this photo of Trump walking around, this photo of Trump talking to people, and this photo of Trump supposedly on the phone. Look at him. Hello, police. Come quick. Somebody stole all the work off my desk. You know, you don't really look like you're working when you're staring directly at the camera. You look like you just got busted having phone sex. I gotta call you back. Coast to coast. The main reason the government was in this mess in the first place is that Trump doesn't know what he believes, other than the fact that he spent the entire campaign promising to build a wall, and now his party is scrambling to find a way to follow through on that promise, even though they know it's absurd. Even Trump's chief of staff, John Kelly, reportedly told lawmakers Trump's promises on the wall were uninformed, and is now saying the so-called wall doesn't even have to be an actual physical barrier.
Did he really say the president was uninformed on the wall?
Yes. Well, I had a meeting. I was sitting right next to him, next to Mr. Kelly, and here's what he said. He said, the president of the United States, when he was campaigning, made promises that were not fully informed. He said, I've educated the president, and the president has evolved on the issue. And when I asked General Kelly, what's a wall? He said, it could be the inhospitable terrain. It could be Border Patrol agents. It could be drones.
Oh my God, this wall keeps getting worse and worse. It could be terrain, it could be drones. Soon it's just gonna be a tunnel painted on the side of a mountain. So we have a president making cartoonish demands that everyone knows are impractical, who has absolutely no guiding principles or knowledge of policy, and who changes his views on a whim depending on who he's talking to. And a former campaign aide told the New York Times that Trump doesn't even care to learn. The misconception is that the president does not know what he does not know. In my experience, the reality is that the president knows what he does not know and does not think he needs to know it. So it's simple. It's not that he does not know what he does not know. It's that he does know what he does not know, which means he doesn't know what he does know, and he does think that he doesn't need to know it. You know? Just to give you an idea of how incoherent and scattershot Trump's views are, he spent the weekend bashing Democrats over DACA, tweeting that Dems just want illegal immigrants to pour into our nation unchecked, even though he himself has spent months insisting that he wants to deal with the Dreamers, the young, undocumented immigrants brought here as children, with compassion.
The DACA situation is a very difficult thing for me. Because, you know, I love these kids. I love kids. I have kids.
They shouldn't be very worried. They are here illegally. They shouldn't be very worried. I do have a big heart. We're going to take care of everybody. Well, I have a great heart for the folks we're talking about, a great love for them. I feel having the Democrats in with us is absolutely vital because this should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love,
Truly, it should be a bill of love.
Of course, a bill of love is also what Trump pays porn stars in hush money. This weekend's shutdown was very much the Trump presidency in microcosm. A president with no guiding principles and no knowledge of policy, flailing wildly and relegated to making cartoonish demands from the sidelines while everyone else scrambles to figure out how to make it work. I don't know what Trump would say about that, but I do know how his biggest critic feels.
The whole world is looking at us and laughing at us.
He's right. This has been a closer look.